Alrighty, lads, we are back. This time with Morrowind, the great House Indoril. House Indoril is one of those unjoinable factions, but despite being unjoinable, that doesn't mean that they're not without nuance. That doesn't mean you don't interact with them. And that's one of the most fascinating things, that House Indoril is probably the one great house that you interact with, I would say, the most. Now, this is kind of odd, because why is a non-joinable faction so interacting in the main story of Morrowind? We're going to kind of get into that. So first, shut the lights, take off your shirt, enjoy some of this sweaty, salty lore that is me, and we're going to kind of get into the roleplay of what it is when you play Morrowind. What is the implications of House Indoril, and how do you engage with them? I find them very fascinating, mostly because of the implications of the lore and the understanding of what it means when you start to play the main quest and piece together what's going on. And, of course, whether or not you believe in the main quest or not. Because unlike other Elder Scroll games, Morrowind's always up for debate. It's not sure whether or not it's real. Skyrim, it's always for a fact that you are the Dragonborn. Now, it's not a fact whether or not you're the last one. There might be others. But I always find that very fascinating with Morrowind, is that the whole thing is debatable. So, House Indoril, what are they? What do they stand for? They stand for the Dunmer people. Indoril is staunch believers in traditional Dunmer society, traditional Dunmer values. They believe in the good Daedra, the bad Daedra, and, of course, their living gods. As such, House Indoril is actually, it's kind of more of a, I want to say House Indoril and the Temple, while they're two separate things, they're basically one thing. And this is very fascinating, because with House Indoril, they are not only the Temple, which after all, they can lay claim to being majority of the priests of the Temple, because after all, one of their living gods is literally from their noble house, Almalexia. Almalexia is related to their house. So as such, it makes sense that most of the priests are following one of their great-great-grandmothers who's still alive because she's a god. But then, not only are they the head of the priests, they're also the ordinators. Now, for those of you who never played Morrowind, cut break here, hold on a minute. What the hell is an ordinator? An ordinator is the law upholder. They're not necessarily a guard, though. There are guards in the game, but an ordinator is a bit above that. An ordinator is someone capable of war. They are trained in every weapon known to man, and they are trained in magic, particularly destruction magic. They're armed in the best equipment that they can afford, and they're also rather deadly. That being said, what does an ordinator uphold if they're different than a guard? So they do uphold the laws, yes, but they also uphold the temple's decrees. So, if a priest looks at you and they say, hey, you are complete heresy. What you're doing right now is completely against the good Daedra, it's completely against the living gods, the living saints, and it's against the saints of the past, the dead ones. What you are doing is so wrong that I'm going to tell the ordinators to kill you. And usually, they do just that. It's one of those things where they're more likely to kill you than they are to arrest you. If you ever get into a fight with them, you're not going to do so well. What's really cool about the game, though, is that House Indoril, being majority of them being ordinators, all ordinators wear Indoril armor, which is this golden helmet mask that looks like a face, but then has a giant mohawk on it. Yeah, that's not their real face. It shocked me when I first saw them. I thought they were Chimer or something back when, I was way young. But no, that's just a helmet. That's just the signature helmet of House Indoril. Because after all, they're very rich. They're the temple. So every time you make a donation, they're the ones who are benefiting. They're also the peacekeepers. So you always want to make sure your peacekeepers are well fed and well paid, right? This is where Indoril gets a lot of their power. This is what feeds their economy. Now, as I said, the main difference between an ordinator and a guard is that guards don't really wage war. Ordinators do. Ordinators, being absolute beasts, they can wage any sort of war that they wish. But, as I said, it's not exactly like they're overflowing in numbers here. They're strictly tied to just one house, and that's about it. Now, is there a few ordinators that are actually not from House Indoril? We're talking very rare here. Very, very rare. It's not that common. Now, with House Indoril being the temple who determines, the spiritual beliefs of their people, and saying, hey, this is what heaven is, this is what hell is, kind of ordeal, and the fact that they actually have gods that are alive in their cities, and one of their gods is literally from their house, House Indoril does feel like they're superior to normal Dunmer, and them being very rich doesn't help things either. As such, they literally have a pair of wings as their noble crest, their flag, their banner. And that's because they believe they really are elevated above others. They believe it's their duty to lead the Dunmer people on the right path that they can choose. Regular Dunmer don't get a choice in what the right path is. There is some hostility between House Indoril and House Telvanni, mostly because, as stated in my Telvanni video, Telvanni mages are very, very old, and they don't believe in the tribunal. As such, they don't really have a lot of temple holdings in their land, mostly because there's mages who are actually older than the tribunal itself. They're older than the 3 living gods, and it's because they're such powerful mages. So yeah, they don't believe in their religion. As such, House Indoril has very little influence with Telvanni, and it's caused a bit of a schism between the two. That being said, Telvanni thankfully aren't that ambitious, so it's never been like a full civil war scenario. But as far as relations go, House Indoril has issues with Telvanni and Hlaalu. Hlaalu, this comes into a bit of a history lesson. So, Third Era, we're talking here. House Indoril has their own king in charge of all the Dunmer people, and the Empire is pushing them. The Empire is invading Morrowind because, as it turns out, according to the prophecies that the Emperor listens to, the 3 living gods are no longer powerful. They're no longer at their zenith. They're actually weak for once. So he takes advantage of this, invades Morrowind. And from here, Morrowind's in a bit of disarray. House Indoril wants to do a bit of a guerrilla warfare, engage them over time, and of course beseech their gods to come help them like they've always had. Their gods are saying no, because they're too weak. But of course they're lying. They're giving other reasons. They're saying like, oh, we can't interfere with times of change. This is for the good of the people, blah, blah, blah. But then we have House Redoran. House Redoran always being the beefy guys, the warriors, the ones who uphold traditional Dunmer values, much like House Indoril, but not as religious. And they're the ones who tend to want to upfront fight. They fight the Empire and get absolutely slaughtered. Now they just lost their most powerful military ally. House Indoril doesn't know what to do. Here it is, they're being invaded. Their very gods are being useless. And they just don't have the forces necessary to fight this kind of engagement. So the king is presented a deal by House Hlaalu, who, of course, remember our last video, House Hlaalu doesn't have enemies. They just have allies. They're allied with the Empire, they're allied with everybody. Well, House Hlaalu tells House Indoril, the king, and says, hey, we've got a deal here. A lot of the houses agree to it. We'll just sign it, and therefore we'll have peace with the Empire, but they are allowed to colonize inside Morrowind, and they're allowed to uphold their own laws in our land. House Indoril says no. No way in hell. It's at this point that the king gets assassinated, and House Hlaalu usurps the throne. And with House Hlaalu's new ally, the Empire, they start writing a bunch of deeds and decrees, and they start usurping a lot of Indoril's land. As such, Indoril is very much beaten to shit, and House Indoril is very much broken and wounded by the time we play Morrowind the game. What's even more interesting is that, well, Vvardenfell, the island that you play on in Morrowind, is now open for colonization, and everyone is flocking there, except for House Indoril. House Indoril views the island, the Red Mountain and such. They view that land as the land for the Ashlanders. They view it while the land has significance, particularly the Ghost Fence. For those of you who don't know, the Ghost Fence is this giant magical barrier that keeps the 6th house trapped and prevents any sort of demon incursions. So House Indoril doesn't really view it with any sort of superstition. They don't really view it as a mandate to colonize this place. So as such, with their inability to colonize, their inability to adapt, House Indoril suffers a major defeat. And they start lagging behind the other great houses. The other great houses start to grow in strength, and so does the empires. They start building forts and colonies on this land. House Indoril, though, sticking to their guns, they kind of stay the way they are. Now, they try to re-rally underneath House Halalu's banner, saying that as long as Halalu sticks to traditional Dunmer ways, they'll be fine. And they start falling back to their church aspect, the temple. As long as the temple holds firm, they are good. Now, this is where we get to the roleplay. This is always my more favorite part of the lore video. What does it mean with Indoril? So, let's get into it. With House Indoril, the very first Hortatar, I may be mispronouncing this, it's a very awful word to pronounce, Hortator, the Hortator, we'll call it Hortator. The very first Hortator in Morrowind was none other than Nerevar Indoril. Let that sink in. Literally Nerevar Indoril. And when he led the great houses and was the head of all the Chimer people, they believe that Indoril Nerevar, or Nerevar Indoril, whichever way you prefer it, they believe that he is a great hero, almost a saint, the way that he led and was wounded, and then subsequently died in battle against the Dwemer and the sixth house, House Dagoth. Now, this is in complete contradiction to other interpretations of the events, and as such, House Indoril has declared this heresy. So when it comes to the Nerevar prophecy, they view it as something that will get you killed. If you believe in it, you will die, because that is utter heresy. And it makes sense from their point of view. So the Nerevar prophecy is that Nerevar will be resurrected, because we don't know how many times he's been resurrected so far. And he will lead to the destruction of the Tribunal Temple and destroy the sixth house. Now you may say, well, that's great, he destroys the sixth house. They're literally evil. Yes, but the problem with the prophecy is the other part, which is the destruction of the Tribunal. The killing of their gods. And with the Tribunal Temple destroyed, House Indoril would lose their last hope. Remind you, they just lost a lot of land, they lost a lot of political holding, they are not as great and mighty as they once were. The only thing they can fall back to is the temple. As long as they hold the temple, they still have some power, some money, some influence. They don't have colonies, they don't have anything like that. And now here's a prophecy that says, about that. We're going to get rid of that too. That very last pearl that you got in your hands, we're going to destroy that too. So it's a very scary thing for House Indoril to see this prophecy possibly be true. And as such, they have to do it in their best interest, which is to go against it. And this is where the roleplay is so good in Morrowind. Oh my god. Because let's say you believe in it. You are Nerevar, reborn. You are Nerevar, unmourned, unworshipped, and here you are, back from the dead, as a living, breathing, demi-human, demigod, whatever sort of ordeal you are. And here you are in a land where your people have been led astray. You look back and you go, oh my god, I didn't fight for this. I didn't fight for this at all. These people are being misled by 3 of my companions, one of which is my wife, Almalexia. Almalexia was Nerevar Indoril's wife. Let that settle in. And here it is that you are fighting to reveal the truth. Listen, my great-great-grandsire children. Know that Almalexia murdered me in the past. That Sothasil and Vivek held me down and murdered me, because they were about to commit sin, heresy against Azura, and this is why we all became Dunmer instead of Chimer. And here you are fighting this uphill battle against a society that for well over thousands of years had been built upon this lie, this giant temple riddled with lies and bullet holes, and you have to fight it. You have to fight it, and show your own children the correct way. You have to engage with them, and they will try to kill you. They'll try to kill you a few times. Oh, trust me, they will. It doesn't matter if you join the temple. The only thing that is different, which I think is a really fascinating aspect of the game, is if you join the temple and you reach one of the higher ranks in the temple, and then you do the main quest and you become Nerevar and you say you're Nerevar, they will simply say, we don't trust you at the moment. This is, of course, in complete stark contrast to the other way, which is if you're not part of the temple and you do the Nerevar prophecy and you say to them, I am Nerevar, they're going to look at you and say, you are a fucking heretic, we're going to kill you. We're going to try the best we can to kill you. And they may send ordinators after you. Here's another thing too, by the way. If you ever wear Indoril armor, the ordinator will automatically attack you when you talk to them. Because the only way you got that armor is by killing one of their own. And that's against the law, and that's also a sin because, mind you, they're religious figures. So this is where it gets so fascinating is, here you are. You were murdered in the past life. Who knows how many other times you've died. And you're trying to do what's best for the Dunmer people to revive them in the eyes of Azura, a Daedric prince who watches after the Dunmer people like her own. And here you are trying to show to them that the three gods that they've been worshipping this whole time were your three closest companions that just simply want power. They just don't want to die. They just want to be immortal gods, rule over everybody, dictate to everyone what life should be like. But reality is, they're living so far away from God's true path. And here you are fighting this uphill battle where you see your struggles. You see your own brethren struggling. Here it is. They just suffered major defeats. They're being eclipsed by other houses who've never been this strong before. And here you are coming at them mournfully, kneeling down on one knee, telling them, you guys are wrong. Everything you've done has been wrong. I'm going to make it all right, and you have to follow this new path. But I'm going to cut the last string of power that you have, which is the temple. I'm going to literally cut it out, and now you're going to be powerless. You might not even be a great house anymore because of this. But if you stick true to your faith in Azura, you stick true to honor, integrity, Dunmer culture, you will hopefully usurp this. You will get through all of this. And that to me is so compelling. This idea, because when I found out in Morrowind when I was playing that I'm actually Nerevar, and I believed that I was Nerevar, because again, it's up for debate. It could just be you're a lucky guy who has magical items. But let's say that you really are Nerevar, and you find out your last name was Indoril. What does that mean? That means that the very people who you're antagonist, they're your kin, they're your brothers, they're your sisters, they're your own descendants. And here they are, they're your number one enemy. They're the main ones who are pushing against you, fighting you, and you're trying to help them. It is a very deep story. The idea of, I'm trying to lift you out of the mud, but you're punching me in the face every time I try to help you. And then you just get deeper and deeper in the mud, and I'm trying to save you, but you don't see the danger that you're in. It is such a fascinating idea. A fascinating idea of, in some ways, parenthood. The idea that sometimes what the parent sees and understands is above what the child sees and understands. And as such, with the youth being unable to see it, they rebel, they fight, they kick, they scream. They don't realize that all you're doing is helping. All you're doing is trying to help them get the best possible future that they can ever achieve. So what happens to Indoril then? What happens to House Indoril later on in Skyrim? According to some reports, they're still alive, and they're still a great house, somehow. And the reason why is because they reformed their temple to no longer worshipping the saints, and they gotten rid of all the previous living gods. They got rid of Vivek, Sothasil, Almalexia, and now they have strictly focused on the good Daedra. and a stricter worship on Azura. So they did reform, and they're still the priesthood. And in one of their reports, it even says that now when you join the priesthood, you actually join House Indoril, which is very fascinating. That's a very interesting idea, that no matter where you come from, the moment you join, you automatically become part of their house. And I think that, in the end, that's a very fitting role. House Indoril is the wings because they are the carriers of the Word of God. And here they are, after being through a baptism of blood and fire, they re-emerge, still bound by conviction, but now a conviction that is true, a conviction that is right, a conviction that is not full of deceits, deception, lies. And this is where I think the Nerevar prophecy is so fascinating. Sometimes what is best for us is what hurts us the most. So with that, see you guys next time. I hope you guys enjoyed.